All right, Raising Happy Teens Unit 4, the tough issues. I hope that none of you have to ever deal with some of these situations that we're going to be going into and talking about tonight. But if you do, it's going to be very helpful to have discussed them and thought about them beforehand so that it doesn't take you totally by surprise. Let's talk about expectations real briefly again. I know we mentioned these in the last class, but it's important. Remember that our kids live up to or down to our expectations. If we figure that they're going to probably try cigarettes or alcohol or drugs or premarital sex, you can bet they will. Do all teens try those things? Is it only natural and to be expected? Are teens at the mercy of their hormones? Or can they use some wisdom and self-control? Our society today will say that you can't stop teens from having sex. No, they're just overtaken by hormones. Well, I contend that our teens can use some wisdom and some self-control and can reach for a higher standard. Think about what your morals and standards are, your values, and pass them on to your kids. What do you want for your kids? Don't look at what TV thinks teens ought to act like today. You think about what do you want for your kids. Okay, I have a survey for you. Do you think that teens care what their parents think about drugs? Do teens care what their parents think about drugs? Okay, vote. Yes or no? Everyone's saying yes so far. Keep going. Anybody else? This is all, anonymous, so you can vote your real thought here. Okay. Kathy votes no. Mike votes yes. All right, you guys are good. You are absolutely right. Teens do care what their parents think about drugs, and we're going to look at some of the research that has been done that shows that. And I am glad about that. I think it's awesome. Okay. Oops. We've got one more survey. Do you think that teens would rather learn about sex from their friends, their parents, the school, physicians and health department, someone in the medical profession? What do you think? Most people are saying their parents. We've got one friend and one school. Anybody else want to vote here? You guys are right again. Yes. Many recent studies have found that teens would prefer to learn about sex and drugs from their parents than anywhere else. I kind of thought that was true in my heart, but that's not really what society says. I mean, in our society today, the health department and the schools are all about teaching kids about sex and about drugs. But teens really would prefer to learn these things from their parents. That is awesome. And number two, teens whose parents talk to them about the harms of sex and drugs are less likely to be involved in those behaviors. All right, this is our big chance. We need to talk to our kids about these things. Okay, what do you think about this word harms here? Are there harms to sex? I mean, obviously there's harms to drugs, right? Are there harms to sex? Certainly there are, especially in this day of AIDS and STDs. But there's also emotional harms, and even some of the research is starting to point to that. We're going to go through some of it here. How to influence your teens. Give them the facts. They're not hearing the real facts at school from their friends. And they're sure not getting the facts from TV or the rest of the media. They need to hear it from you. Talk to them about your values, beliefs, and thoughts. They care. If you're saying, absolutely, this is wrong, these are the harms, they will be much more likely to listen to you. There's a high percentage that does. And then, gosh, we've got to practice what we preach. Then this number 4 here, supervision, spot checks, and consequences. We have to supervise our kids. We have to know where they are and what they're doing and who they're with, as we talked about in an earlier class. And if they have been in the habit of lying about those things, then we need to be doing spot checks to make sure that they're really where they said they would be and with whom they said they would be with, and provide consequences if they're not. Probably the electric rule or the 24-hour rule. These things are important. All right, let's look at some sex facts. Teen sex and resulting abortions have been associated with increased mental health problems for teens. Isn't that amazing? You know, they're just not showing that on TV. TV and movies make it look like everybody has sex and goes their merry way. And we do know about, the STDs and AIDS, but here's the research that's starting to point to mental health problems, including depression and suicidal tendencies. That's serious. Okay, in addition, teen pregnancy has been found to decrease self-esteem and educational attainment, thus contributing to the high percentage of families headed by teen parents living in poverty. You know, part of that is a no-brainer that a lot of teens who get pregnant drop out of high school and end up living in poverty. We pretty well know that. But did you know that teen pregnancy decreases self-esteem? Okay. 1/3 of babies in the U.S. are born to unwed mothers. This is actually a statistic that I got several years ago, and I believe I've heard that it's closer to 50% now. I may be wrong on that, but I know that it's at least 1/3. Every year, 3 million teens contract one of 60 different STDs, and 1 million become pregnant. Okay, here's a nice little fact that you could bring up with your kids. Gosh, did you know that there are 60 different STDs? That'll open a conversation for you and give you an opportunity to share your values and some facts. Abstinence works, and there are no harmful side effects. How about that? Okay. Sexual activity is usually associated with other negative behaviors, like using drugs or, let me just read this one for you. I love the way they word it. This is a direct quote. Early adolescent sexual involvement has been closely associated with risky behaviors such as using drugs, not using contraception at first intercourse, having multiple sex partners, and having frequent intercourse. It may also be a marker for other sexual behaviors that place an individual at greater risk for sexually transmitted diseases, such as lack of condom use, less discriminating recruitment of sex partners, and having multiple sex partners in a short period of time. Finally, early age at first intercourse is directly linked to sexually transmitted disease and to cervical cancer. This was a mouthful, but it says a lot. And this is all researched. And, I've got the where it's from on the next page. But this is serious stuff. And we need to talk to our kids about these things. Let's talk about condom use for a second. It used to be called safe sex, having sex with a condom, because I guess it was considered safe because it prevented pregnancy, which it does to a certain degree, but it's certainly not 100% effective. But the effectiveness of using condoms against AIDS and STDs is way lower. Condom use does not make sex safe physically. Most STDs can still be caught even though using a condom. The second one, this association between sexual activity and other negative behaviors is also revealed in this next person's Small and Luster study. Also related to sexual activity with teens is poor school performance, low educational aspirations, alcohol and marijuana use. Pretty serious stuff. Only 4.4% of sexually active teens were involved in sexual activity exclusively. In other words, 22.7% were involved in various forms of delinquency, alcohol use, and sexual activity. When you're talking about the harms to teens, usually they're not just being sexually active. They're also involved in other delinquent activities. Here's the references. I believe they're on your handout also, so you can look at them later. Here's some alcohol facts, and these should be good for starting conversations with your kids about drugs and alcohol. But before we go there, let's take a second and talk about the sex facts. Any questions, comments at this point? Erica says, I heard that if you have premarital sex, your sex life and marriage could be affected. I've definitely heard that too. A lot of psychologists will say that, and you can read about it in lots of different books. Oh, Kathy agrees, yes. Any other comments? These are kind of touchy topics. I mean, they're not things that we usually talk about and usually feel overly comfortable talking about. And yet, you know what? Our kids are talking about them with the other kids. And so we need to at least pretend like we're comfortable talking about these things and start the conversation and encourage it. We need to start the conversation so that our kids know that we're willing to talk about sex. It's okay. They can bring it up. They can ask us a question. Okay, Erica says we always knew in high school who the people were that were having sex, and there were also the hard partiers. Yep, they go together. There's all this research that shows that kids are much more likely, girls especially, to have sex if they've been drinking. That's kind of a no-brainer. How old is it okay to answer the questions? Kathy, at any age that they ask you questions. You know, your 5-year-old can ask you about where do babies come from, and you don't have to give them all the details. You just let them, you can start out at that age saying, out of mommy's tummy. Mommy has a special place to grow babies in her tummy. And then, you can point out pregnant women, that you see. She's going to have a baby. She goes to the hospital to get the baby out. At some point you can be more specific about, as the kids get older, letting them know exactly what these body parts are called and how they function. Partiers? Yes. Okay. On to alcohol and drugs. Did you know that it is 15 times faster for a teen to get addicted to alcohol than for an adult who's drinking the same amount? When using regularly, more than once a week, teens may become addicted in as little as 9 to 12 months. The younger the teen is, the more quickly he can become addicted. Because their bodies are not done growing yet, their brains are not done growing yet. And so alcohol has a much bigger impact on them physiologically than it does on adults. Now combine this first fact, that they can become addicted in as little as 9 to 12 months, with fact number 2. The average length of time that a teen has been drinking before getting caught is 13 to 17 months. That means that the first time a parent catches their son or daughter drinking, that child may actually be addicted already. That is a scary thought. Now, how can a child be drinking for 13 to 17 months without his or her parents knowing it? If you wait up for your kids to come home at night and you talk to them and you give them a hug and a kiss before they go to bed, you will not miss the fact that they come in smelling like alcohol or that they come in not able to walk straight. We need to be aware. The average age of a child's first drunk is 13 years old. You know, and most of these facts, they're getting worse all the time. I mean, like by next year, it may be down to 12 years of age. These things just seem to get worse. The average age of teen supplier is 18 to 22 years old. They're not much older than our teens. They might be kind of hanging out together. The older a child is at the time of his first use, the less likely he is to become addicted. And of course, the converse is true as well. The younger a child is at the time of his first use, the more likely he is to become addicted. And addiction is serious. We're talking about chemical addiction. You know, what happens once a person becomes addicted? Do you realize that there are essentially only 4 final outcomes to drug or alcohol addiction? I'm talking about the final outcomes. A whole lot of bad things can happen to someone who's an addict. They can lose their jobs, they can lose friendships, they can lose relationships, they can lose all of their money, their homes, their relationships with their spouse, their kids, etc. But the 4 final outcomes of addiction are either death, loss of mental health, jail, or intervention. Okay? Everyone who's an addict eventually comes either to death, they go crazy, they end up in jail, or someone intervenes and gets them to change. If you have a child who is addicted, it's the parent's responsibility to do the intervention. It is tough, but it can be done. I have seen people do it. It takes a lot of love, a lot of strength, a lot of support, but it can be done. Better to nip it in the bud or be awake and alert when they come home and don't even let them start drinking. That's much easier. Okay, adolescents drink less and have fewer alcohol-related problems when their parents discipline them consistently and set clear expectations about drinking. Okay, here we have it again. Parents who say, no, you may not drink, have fewer kids who actually drink. Parents who discipline their kids have a lower percentage of kids who actually drink. These are important things. Sometimes it's hard to discipline our kids, but we need to know that we're doing it because we love them. We're doing what's best for them. All right, we've got more facts here. Parents' drinking behaviors and favorable attitudes towards drinking have been associated with adolescents initiating and continuing use. Again, a little bit of a no-brainer here. If the parents are going to be drinking a lot, the kids are probably going to drink too. If parents have favorable attitudes and allow their kids to drink, then the kids probably will drink. A bit of a duh there. But again, the converse is true too. If you're against it, you're opposed, and you voice your standards, your reasons, your values, your kids are likely to follow in your footsteps. You know, I mentioned in an earlier class the importance of parents and kids having fun together and having parties with other families together without alcohol. And I think that is really important that we show our kids that, hey, even we as adults get together and have fun and play and have parties without alcohol. A lot of teens grow up thinking that the way to be an adult is to drink. They grow up thinking that every time their parents get together or go someplace or go out for dinner, they drink. Every time their parents have a party, there's drinking. We need to show them that that's not the case. We can have fun without alcohol, and they can too. Alcohol and sex are connected. What do you know? Girls are more likely to have sexual intercourse if they've been drinking. Teenage girls who drink are more likely to have sex and have it without a condom than girls who do not drink. All right. Let's talk comments, questions here about alcohol or the combination of alcohol and sex? Yes, Kathy, you're right. There is a genetic tendency. And so people who have alcoholism in their families need to be extra careful with their kids. And their kids need to know that, hey, there's a gene for this. It's genetic. Your probability of turning into an addict once you start drinking is way higher than other people's. Okay, Erica says, do you feel that turning in parents who allow parties to underagers is okay? It's a really good topic. There are some parents who think that they want to teach their kids to drink, quote, responsibly, so they let them drink at home. And I don't know what they're doing, if they're just teaching them that it's wrong to drink and drive, but or do they actually limit how much the kids drink? I mean, are the parents there making sure that everybody only has one beer? I doubt it. I think there's a lot of parents who take the attitude of, well, I'd rather have my kid drink at home than drink somewhere else and drink and drive. You know, again, you're just teaching your kid it's okay to drink. What about the kids who come to that parent's house for the party and drive home drunk? Is the parent going to let every kid who comes to the party stay overnight? But regardless to the answer to all of those questions, it is illegal for kids under age 21 to drink. And any parent who allows it or supplies it is really breaking the law. My personal opinion, yes, turn in parents who allow their kids to drink, that have it at their home. It's against the law. And they're harming other people's kids too. So, yeah, I would suggest, recommend, turn them in. But if someone is caught buying alcohol for underage kids, do they get in trouble? Why not the parents? The person buying it and supplying it is the one who gets in trouble. If the parents bought it and supplied it for their party at home, then yes, that's breaking the law. Kathy says girls might drink to have sex in order to please a boyfriend. Pressure to have sex. She wouldn't otherwise allow herself. Yes, that's true. All very true. These are all things that we need to talk to our kids about, give them our opinions, and then listen to theirs. You know, encourage them to think for themselves and to think about what they believe is right. Okay, let's talk about marijuana. The average age of the first try is 14 years old. 20% of 8th graders have tried it at least once. 20% of 10th graders have used marijuana in the past month. Nearly 50% of teens try marijuana while in high school. But you know what? That means that over 50% of teens never try marijuana in high school. I really like stating that statistic the other way around because then it's positive. Your kid can't say, well, everybody's doing it. No, everybody's not doing it. The majority's not doing it. You also need to know that marijuana today is much, much stronger than it was 20 years ago. Or for those of you who are older like me, 30 years ago. You know, some parents, when they think about their kids smoking marijuana, they're thinking about the stuff that they tried 20 or 30 years ago. It is not the same thing. It is much more potent and serious today. But nonetheless, just because we did it when we were kids doesn't mean that our kids have to do it or that we have to allow our kids to do it. We know better. We know what's best for our kids. We want what is best for our kids. If we don't want them to try marijuana, we need to do all that we can to prevent that. Not just fall into society's ways of, well, kids will try it. Nope, not my kids. Signs of drug and alcohol use. Are you familiar with these signs? Um, I'm not giving this to you just so you can look at your own kid and say, whoa, let me check his condition when he comes home. But you might also be aware of these things when your kids bring home new friends, or when you're out in the community and you see kids around. You can tell if they're using or not. All right, let's talk about stimulants first. Cocaine, speed, meth, crank. Um, Stimulants obviously speed the body up. They stimulate. Kids, people, when they're on using these drugs, go, go, go. They talk really fast. They laugh a lot. They never get tired, and then they crash hard. They may stay awake, for over 24 hours, but then when they crash hard, and you can't wake them up, and they sleep for a long time. They're talkative. They talk too fast. They appear nervous. They can have a dry mouth. So they might be drinking a lot, carrying a water bottle around and taking little sips frequently, or chewing gum, dilated pupils. Weight loss. They're not hungry. They don't eat much. Increased moodiness and irritability. Some of these things you're going to say, well, yeah, all teens are moody and irritable. So do I suspect that they're all on stimulants? No. But you can tell if all of a sudden your kid has, a major increase in moodiness or irritability. Look for that. All right, depressants, like alcohol, marijuana, and tranquilizers. Everybody knows what someone who's drunk looks like. They have a blank stare, glassy eyes, they trip, they can't walk a straight line, they've got slow reflexes, they have an inability to concentrate or to remember, reduced coordination and balance, slurred speech. Those are all true of marijuana or tranquilizers also. In general, if you note a series of some of these things, you should be concerned. Changes in eating, sleeping, or behavior. If there's a change in their eating habits or their sleeping habits or just their behavior in general, this could be a clue. It doesn't mean for sure, it just means it's a clue. Lack of motivation, less interaction with home and family, anxiety or depression, irritability, moodiness, a change in friends, a drop in grades or school attendance, circles under the eyes, pale complexion, unhealthy looking, constant sinus problems. That would be from snorting. These can be signs of drug use, but on the other hand, they can also be signs of other things. I mean, anxiety or depression could actually be clinical anxiety or depression. Irritability could be hormones. But if you see several of these things, a combination of these things, then it's time to be alert and investigate. Number 5 is probably a biggie. Change of friends, drop in grades, or school attendance. That's pretty important. And also, if you see a big change in eating or sleeping behavior, that's a big clue too. Our kids will do things to try and hide the use. They'll try and hide red eyes or dilated eyes by using Visine or putting on sunglasses or wearing a hat low over their eyes. Did you know that that's why baseball caps became so popular several years ago? And kids wore them like all the time, and they, really hid their eyes under them way low. Of course, to cover up the odors, they use gum and breath mints, perfume, incense, candles. A kid who's on a stimulant may be staying up late, and they may be giving a really good excuse like, oh, I have to study, I've got a bunch of work that's due, or I've got a big test tomorrow. But be aware that it can also be a sign of stimulant use. Sleeping in late, difficulty waking up, that can be a sign of drug use. You can be a positive influence. I love these statistics. Kids who learn from their parents and caregivers about the risks of drugs are about 36% less likely to smoke marijuana, 50% less likely to use inhalants, 56% less likely to use cocaine, and 65% less likely to use LSD. Those are huge statistics, and that's just for kids who have learned from their parents and caregivers about the risks of drugs. Now, I've just given you a bunch of facts. You can use any one of them to start a conversation with your kids. You probably don't want to open a conversation with, are you using drugs? Or do your friends drink alcohol? Because you're probably not going to get a real honest and open answer to that question. But if you ask something like, is there marijuana use at your school? Or if you wanted to get a hold of some marijuana, would you know who to ask or where you could get it from or where it's being sold at school? That might be more likely. Or, give some of those facts about STDs. Go to the health department and pick up a pamphlet and leave it laying on the kitchen counter so that they might even look at it and raise a conversation with one of the facts in it. Go to your juvenile probation office and get a flyer on drugs and alcohol. Or, just use the good old internet. Look up some of these sites and get some information, print it out. They'll have an article or something. Leave it laying around. Leave it in the bathroom. Maybe they'll pick it up and read it. And even if they don't, you can always just mention one of the facts in passing and let your kids know you are willing to talk to them about these important issues in their lives. Okay. Comments and questions. What are your thoughts here? Okay, Erica says, a lot of drugs these days are cut with other really harmful stuff. Right. I mean, if the drugs themselves aren't harmful enough, they're stuck with poison and all sorts of other stuff inside of them. Kathy says, it sounds like all of this is an issue of self-love and self-respect and respect for others. Good point. Very good point. And that is another way that you can start a conversation with your kids. That is so true, especially when we talk about girls having sex to please their boyfriends when they really don't want to. Because they want a boyfriend so badly and they want to be loved so badly. Well, that's natural. We do all want to be loved. All of us want to fall in love and get married when we're teenagers. But on the other hand, if our kids are very secure in our love for them, in the family's love, if they feel like they belong, then they're not going to have such a powerful need to have a boyfriend and to give sex to get a boyfriend. This points again to all those ways that we can strengthen our bonds with our kids that we talked about in Unit 1. We talked about praise for being, praise for trying, praise for doing. Those are really important. Making positive predictions in their lives, talking to them instead of talking on our cell phone, turning off the radio when we drive. All of these things are ways that we can bond with our kids so that we can have conversations with them about these really important issues. If we start talking about the little stuff with them when they're 5 and 10, we can continue that by talking about big stuff when they're 14 and 15. All right, other comments and questions? On this next slide, you're in one of these 4 situations here. Either you know that your kids don't use drugs and alcohol, you think and hope that your kids don't use, you suspect that your kids might use, or you know that your kids use. What are you going to do in each of these situations? Well, in all of them, you need to continue to build your relationship with your kids, just like we've been talking about. With all of them, no matter which situation you're in, you need to talk to your kids about drugs. Tell them your values. All the research points to the importance that you can make as a parent. If we suspect that our kids might use, it's going to be really important to supervise, to spot check, to make sure they're where they said they were going to be, make sure that there really is a parent there, make sure that there really aren't alcohol or drugs there. Supervise them, be awake and alert when they come home, and give them a hug. Maybe search their room. If you suspect that your kids might use, you are going to want to search their room. Look for any signs of drug use, from cigarette wrappers to bongs, which can be odd-looking paraphernalia made out of pipes or pop bottles or plastic bottles, etc. Look for anything weird. Maybe notes from their friends. And then finally, provide consequence. If you suspect that your kids might be using, or especially if you know that your kids are using, you have got to provide consequences. Search their room, enforce the electric rule, limit their friends and their activities, and report it. I think it is really important that we use the help of juvenile probation, that we use the law to help us enforce our rules. If you've got kids that are involved in drugs and alcohol, they could very well be involved in some other illegal activities. And you want the assistance, the help of the juvenile probation office. And so you got to file a complaint with the police department. If your kids have done something illegal like drinking or buying drugs, report it. Unfortunately, sometimes the Juvenile Corrections Department works very slowly. The wheels turn very slowly. And it may take a whole lot of misdemeanors or even a couple of felonies before your child will get on juvenile probation. And so you've got to report all the little things so that you can build up the record, which sounds awful, but it's a reality. But I've talked to a lot of parents who were so glad once their kids got on probation, because then they had somebody else helping them enforce the rules, setting the curfew, limiting who they could hang out with. It gave them some teeth. And especially single parents, it's hard to enforce tough rules all by yourself. And I've heard a lot of single parents who have just been really glad once their kids got on juvenile probation, because it helped them a lot. They weren't happy about it, but it did help them. All right, let's move on to some of the other behaviors that you might run into with teens. Refusing to comply. It's one thing when your 2-year-old says no. It's another thing when your 16-year-old says no. And especially when you've told him, no, you cannot go to that drinking party, and he goes out the door anyway. What do? Well, you look at it as running away, which, number one, you can report that to the police. And, you've got one more thing on the record there. You can also enlist their help. Enlist the help of the police in finding them. We're going to talk in a minute here about what to do if they actually run away, but that's what you're going to do. If they go out, you address it as if they actually ran away. What do you do if your kids are hitting, throwing things? That's domestic violence, which is against the law. Domestic violence just isn't husbands hitting wives, it's vice versa, and it's also kids hitting parents, which is just as violent, just as dangerous, and just as scary, just as illegal. Report it. What do you do when your kids are yelling or they argue at you? You can ignore, walk away, enforce your consequences. You may not be able to enforce your consequences right away if they're in the middle of anger or tantrum. I mean, even 16-year-olds throw temper tantrums. You may have to walk away for the time. You may even have to leave the house if it's getting dangerous. But you'll enforce the consequences later after they've calmed down. What if your kids are verbally abusing you, using threatening language, or they won't let you walk away? That's domestic violence also. You pick up the phone and call the police. You go to the bathroom and shut the door. You de-escalate the confrontation then and there, and then later you follow up with the phone call to the police or the consequences that you're going to enforce. So when do you call the police? It is really tough to call the police on your own child, but be aware that domestic violence repeats itself and gets worse. It does not go away. I don't know how many times parents would say, well, if it happens again, then I'll call or I'll do this. But it will happen again. That's just a fact. If you look up the research on domestic violence, it will happen again and it will get worse. It doesn't just magically go away by itself. Just like your kids don't magically stop yelling no at you when they're 2 years old by themselves. It's you enforcing the consequences that teaches them that they're going to have to change their behavior. The same is true here. Be aware that if your kids are violent in the home, that home behavior will soon extend to public places, and they're going to start being violent in other places too. Which means that other people besides you might be getting hurt, and it might be someone besides you who's going to have to enforce the consequences, like the police or juvenile probation. But remember that it is way better for your kids to learn that their behavior has consequences from their parents while they're under 18 and can deal with the juvenile probation system than to wait until they're over 18 and they've got to deal with the adult legal system. Keep these things in mind when you're deciding what to do about your kid's behavior. And remember, if you call the police, your child will get the help that he needs, and you will get the help and relief that you need. You may even find that you get some help from counselors and even, the financial support to pay for counseling if you call the police. All right, tough issues. Comments, questions, thoughts here. Okay, Kathy says, how often do we check his room for drugs? You don't have to check his room unless you suspect that there's drug use going on. If you see some of those signs of drug use, then it would be time to check. And if you find out that he is using, then you may want to check on a regular basis, like every day or every week. I'm sorry, Erica, that you can't hear me anymore. I know your computer only works for a certain period of time. Yep, maybe I can email you answers to some of your questions. All right. Onward, threats of running away. A lot of kids will threaten to run away, and a lot of parents will respond with, go ahead, see how far you get. I don't like that response. It is not loving. If your child is feeling so bad that he or she wants to run away, you need to reassure him of your love and let him know the truth. And the truth is that you love him more than anything, and you want him to stay, and you want to be able to work things out. Never challenge a child to run. That may actually be the thing that pushes him over. On the other hand, you do have to reassure your child of the importance of your restrictions, and you do have to remain firm on your consequences. Don't back down out of feelings of fear or guilt. If you have put a limit on which parties they can go to, or how late they can stay out, or who they can hang out with, or any other thing, and they get mad and threaten to run away, especially if they threaten to run away to, say, your ex-spouse, um, that can give you a scare. It can make you feel bad, feel scared, feel guilty, but nonetheless, you still have to do what is best for your kids. Reassure them of your love, but also reassure them of the importance of your restrictions. You are not going to back down on your rules just because he threatens to run away. Get professional help if threats continue or if the child remains distressed. There may be more going on in his life, and maybe you need some additional help. Maybe the child needs to talk to a counselor. What do you do if they actually do run away? Now, there are a few kids who run away and really disappear. They go to a different state, they change their name, they hang out in the streets. That's not what we're going to talk about here. What we're going to talk about is the kid who doesn't like the restrictions that you set and takes off. He's probably at a friend's house, so what you need to do is call all of his friends' parents and let them know that you did not kick him out the way he explained it to them, that you love him, that you want him or her back home, and ask the friend's parents not to allow your child to spend the night. Very often, kids will run away. They'll go to the friend's house and say, "My mom hates me. She kicked me out. She did this. She did that. She said this. She said that," and none of it's true. So you need to call the friend's parents and explain that to them, and tell them that you'd like your child home. Is my child there? Would you please send him home? Or I'd like to come and get him. If you don't find him at a friend's house, ask the school to notify you if the child shows up. Again, you can go and get him, talk to him, reconcile. If it's evening, which it usually is, go looking for your child. If you live in a small town like I do, you can probably find him. There's a limited number of places that it can go. If it's a larger city, it may be tougher, but you probably have some really good guesses as to where your child could be. And if you have kept up with that phone book, address book for all of your kids' friends, you'll know where to go looking. If you can't find him, file a police report and have them help you find him. Finally, remove the child's clothing and valuables from the home. Why? Because you want to make it more difficult for the child to stay away than for him to return home. Some kids will sneak into the house in the night, grab a change of clothes, their money, their iPod, their favorite things, and then take off again. You don't want that to happen, so you want, to keep the door locked, or if the door is going to be open, be sleeping near it so that you'll hear them come in. Make it more difficult for the child to stay away than for him to return home. And finally, you can post some photos of him up around town, preferably photos from a couple of years ago, or photos where he doesn't look his best and he might be embarrassed. It may work. You may get him home. Okay, we only have just a couple of minutes, so we've got threats of suicide and suicides to talk about really quick. I hate the thought of having to discuss suicide. It is so awful. But in almost every class that I have ever taught, there is somebody there who says, "My kid threatened suicide," or "My nephew did," or "My nephew committed suicide," or "My neighbor did." I mean, it is rampant today with teenagers. So we need to be aware and consider the possibility. Just like with runaways, never challenge the child. Always take it seriously and get help. If your kid is threatening suicide, call a mental health care professional or the police or 911. Don't wait. Just do it. While you're waiting for them to get there, don't leave the child alone. Keep him or her engaged. Enlist the help of the child's best friend or another trusted adult, a neighbor. but you don't want to give him time, even a couple of minutes alone. You don't want to give him time to carry through on his threat. Make sure that you're supervising him. Now, here's the deal. Either the kid is serious or he's not. If he's serious, you're going to be really glad that you called the mental health care professional. If they were bluffing and you call the mental health care professional and they have to go through a great big long interview and surveys and questionnaires, your kid will never use that tactic again. He'll never threaten suicide again to get his way. But it's just way too serious to take a chance on. If he's making a threat, take it serious and act on it. Signs to look for: low self-esteem, an exaggerated view of the problems. Your kid may be talking about his problems, and to you it's like, that's no big deal. We can solve that in a day or two or in a week, or just ignore, or, whatever. But if to him it is overwhelming and insurmountable, then that may be a sign of depression along with the suicidal tendency, or causing the suicidal tendency. But at any rate, whatever is causing the problem to seem so appear to him, if that's the way it seems to him, that's the way he's going to respond to it, even if it looks like a little problem to you. Having a lack of direction, having a severe reaction to the loss of a friend. Personality or behavior changes. We talked about behavior change being a sign of drug use. Well, it can also be a sign of threats for suicide. Giving away favorite possessions. A child who's made a decision to kill himself might give away his favorite possessions. Oh, I want you to have my guitar, and I want you to have my favorite ring, because you're my best friend. Changes in sleeping or eating habits. Dangerous, self-destructive behavior. Talking about death. Idolizing someone who committed suicide. Even having a sudden, unexplained improvement in happiness in their behavior can be a sign of suicide, because perhaps they've made the decision that, yep, okay, I've got it. I've got a plan. I'm going to take care of it this Friday when Mom and Dad are gone. All I need to do is make it until Friday, and they'll feel better. So beware of that. And again, all these things that you've learned about tonight, I hope that you never need to know these things with your own kids, that you never have to face these situations with your own kids. But you may be able to help a neighbor, a friend, a relative who has a kid facing some of these issues. So it's good to know. More information at these resources, good websites for information on all of these really serious teen issues. All right, last chance for questions and answers. Okay, Kathy's asking about de-escalation techniques, and she's also talking about how music and art and pets are helpful with kids. Knowing others' care can help. Absolutely.